great sorrow gripped at the heart of the poor woodcutter as he left his home for the woods. He was so sad. It had been a hard year. His beloved wife had passed away just a few months ago, and even as he went to eke a meager living off the land, he did not know what he was going to feed his baby daughter that very evening. Deep in sad thoughts, he didn't even notice that someone was standing on the path right in front of him, until he saw the light, much different than the muted sunlight, filling the whole path. As he lifted his eyes, he saw a beautiful enchantress. Her whole being shone as if from inner light, and she wore a golden dress, and her hair shone as if it was spun from pure sunlight. The enchantress looked at him with sorrow and said, "Oh, woodcutter, I know what sadness is in your heart, and I do understand your troubles. I have come here to offer a solution of sorts. If you agree, I will take your daughter with me to my palace and make sure that she has everything her heart desires. She will eat cake every day. She will have no shortage of toys. She will have the best education, the best tutors, the best of everything that I can provide. For despite me being a mighty enchantress, I have no children of my own, and I so yearn for a little daughter." The woodcutter thought long and hard about her offer, but he saw that this was the only salvation for his daughter, for if he did not agree, most likely certain death awaited her. So that very day, he handed his daughter to the enchantress to raise, and she promised to treat her like her very own daughter. And she did. She took her to her palace, and she made sure that the child had everything she could possibly need. And she was growing up to be a resourceful young lady, excelling at everything she tried her hand at. Her manners were impeccable. Her studies, her tutors were always full of praise for her. She was growing to be quite a responsible young lady too. And one day, the enchantress decided to give her the responsibility of taking care of the palace keys while she was away. This was the most responsible job. But the enchantress said that she believed that the girl was ready for it. So she handed the keys to the palace off to the girl with one warning. She said, "Daughter, I leave you responsible for the palace and all the servants and all the lands. You will have advice, but you and you alone will hold the keys. Now there's only one thing I want you to remember, and that one thing is, on the 3rd floor, at the very end of the hallway, there's a small wooden door. I absolutely forbid you going to that room or even opening that door. It is your responsibility to ensure that no one enters that very room." And with that, the enchantress bid her goodbye and left. The girl was very proud of herself for having gained such trust, and she took her responsibilities very seriously. For a while, everything went smoothly. But as the days and then weeks went by, the thought of the forbidden room kept coming to her mind over and over and over again, until it became almost an obsession. The young girl couldn't think of anything but the door to her room, to that room. And even though she had the best toys, she had the best playmates, she had everything, she couldn't stop thinking about the small wooden door on the 3rd floor. One day, while all the servants were busy preparing the evening meal and taking care of their other tasks, the young girl sat on the stairwell playing with the big set of palace keys. And a little tiny iron key kept falling into her hand as if by itself. She knew that this must be the key to the small wooden door on the 3rd floor, for there was no other door that she knew of that it would open. And then she thought, well, the enchantress forbade me to enter the room, but what if I just see if the key fits? What if I just try the key in the door for a moment, for a small second? I will put the key in the door and then I'll go downstairs. That's all I'll do. And with that resolution in her heart, she went up to the 3rd floor and approached the door. She had some doubt in her heart. It was, after all, expressly forbidden that she enter that room. But her obsession was so strong. The forbidden fruit was so appealing that she could not stop herself. As she put the key in the door, and then she turned it just a little bit, and then just a little bit more, and sure enough, it turned. The lock clicked. And then she turned it all the way. And here's the door. Here the door was unlocked. And the only thing that stood between her and it was the door handle, which presently she pressed, and she opened it just a crack. Inside, there was a light she had never imagined. It was so bright and so golden, it was almost like you could touch the light. She opened it just a little bit more, and the light was mesmerizing. She reached out her hand, and just with her smallest finger, she reached into the room to touch the light. Just the moment that her finger made contact with the light, the whole finger turned gold, right there. The girl got frightened, locked the door quickly, ran downstairs, and tried washing and scrubbing and washing and scrubbing and washing and scrubbing her finger. She tried everything there was in the whole palace. She tried the floor cleaner and every other cleaner she could find, and nothing helped. Even though her skin got raw and red and eventually it hurt, underneath, her finger was still gold. Red and gold, but still gold. She tried washing it every day, until the day that the enchantress came, when she took a bit of a rag and wrapped it around her finger as if she had hurt it. The enchantress entered the palace and looked at the girl and looked into her heart. And she could see plain as day that the girl had disobeyed her. But she stopped and she asked the question, "Daughter, have you obeyed me while I was away?" "Oh, yes, mother," said the girl. I obeyed you in every way. Daughter, are you sure that you obeyed my every command while I was gone? Oh, yes, mother, I obeyed you, said the girl. Daughter, I ask you for the last time, please tell me the truth. Have you obeyed my command not to enter the room on the 3rd floor with a small wooden door? Oh, mother, I would never disobey you, said the girl. I never went in that room. And suddenly, as she uttered the last word, everything around her changed. The palace walls seemed to dissolve right on the spot, and suddenly she was standing in the middle of a very dense forest. Frightened, the girl ran this way and that, but everywhere around her the bush was so thick she could not get through. She cried for a while, but as no help arrived, she tried to do the best she could. She would eat berries and leaves. She slept in a hollowed out tree trunk. And she spent a long time alone in the woods. It was more than a few years later when the king of a nearby kingdom was hunting in the woods. He was chasing a stag that had been wounded, and galloping on his steed, he jumped over the bushes into the meadow where the girl was trapped. As he landed and looked at her, he was frozen in his tracks. He had never seen such a beautiful maiden in his entire life. Her hair was long and golden and looked like spun silk, and it covered her whole person. She tried to speak, but no sound came out of her throat. She was mute. The king extended his hand and bowed to her. My lady, I have never seen beauty such as yours. It would be my pleasure to throw a feast in your honor. Please join me at my palace. The girl readily agreed, but still no sound escaped her throat. The king took her to his castle, where the servants bathed and clothed her in the clothes appropriate to the guests of the palace. And as she entered the dining room, her beauty radiated around her. The king was enamored. He did not mind that she was a mute, for she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever laid his eyes on. Within weeks, he asked her to marry her, and she agreed. They lived happily for many months, until one day she became pregnant. And soon after, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. That evening, as she held her baby in her arms, and all the midwives and servants had left her chamber, she was finally alone for the first time with her baby. The mighty enchantress appeared in her room. With a gesture, she released the hold that she had on her throat, and the girl could speak again, just like she could before. The enchantress said, "Daughter, I'm so pleased at your happiness, and I have come here to ask you but one question. While I was away from the palace all those years ago, please tell me, have you disobeyed me and entered the small room with the wooden door? No, mother, I did not disobey you, said the girl. And in that very moment, the enchantress snatched her baby from her arms and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. The girl cried all night, and in the morning, when the midwives came back in, they cried. They declared her a man-eater, a witch. But the king would have none of it. He said that anyone who speaks against his wife will be charged with treason. That is impossible that she could be a man-eater, a witch. That's preposterous. There must be some other magic afoot. And so they lived happily for months more. And eventually time came when the queen was pregnant again and about to give birth. And just as last time, all the midwives and servants gathered and received the baby. And yet again, he was a beautiful baby boy. And that very evening, as she laid in her chamber, and the midwives and the servants had just stepped out for a moment, the mighty enchantress came back again and unlocked her voice for just a few moments in order to ask her a question. Daughter, I ask you one more time. While I was away from the palace, have you entered the room I expressly forbade you to enter? And yet again, the girl could not say anything but, I obeyed you. I did not go into that room. And just like last time, the baby was snatched from her arms in a matter of seconds. And when the midwives and servants came back in, the baby was gone. This time, the uproar reached the city council and all the advisors to the king, and they all declared that the queen should be charged for being a witch. But the king put his foot down and said he will not have it, and any man who speaks against the queen will be charged with treason. He was so in love with her. He could not believe that his beloved wife could do something so horrible. And then it happened again. For the third time, the queen was pregnant. And for the third time, she gave birth, this time to a beautiful baby girl. And as she held her baby, and the midwives stepped out for just a moment, the mighty enchantress appeared again, just to ask the same question. Daughter, have you disobeyed me when I left you in charge of the palace? And just like an automaton, not knowing why, the girl said again, no, mother, I did not disobey you. And at that moment, her throat closed again, just like the previous times. And the baby was snatched. And the enchantress disappeared before anyone could see her. This time, the king could not defend her any longer. This time, she was declared a man-eater. This time, she was declared a witch and taken away in chains and thrown into the dungeon. The very next morning, a great big pyre was erected in the middle of the town square, and all the townsfolk came out to see the queen burned. And they tied her to the post, and the pyre was all around her. And as they lit the first branches on fire, oh, she cried, why did I say the same thing so many times? Why? Why didn't I just admit that I disobeyed? And as those very words escaped her lips, the mighty enchantress appeared at the gates to the courtyard. She was leading two small boys by the hand and had her baby daughter, in her arms. And she said, "Daughter, all I wanted to hear is the truth. And now that you have spoken the truth, you have redeemed yourself. I forgive you. And hereby I return your children to you. And I bless you and your family to live happily forever after."